Alright, so we're checking out the Geelang Kuda 100X Cinewhoop in this video. So this one here, Banggood sent to me. I did not get this from Geelang. I don't know why they don't send me stuff anymore. I gave them some feedback on some previous models on how they can make things better, but apparently they don't like that. But I did find a couple of things wrong with this model, and of course I'm sure the feedback I'm sending to Geelang is going to go on deaf ears, but they're not necessarily deal breakers. I guess you could make that judgment for yourself. I'll tell you what the two big flaws were for this model in this video, but let's go talk about the specs here and the design. So this came to me as an analog version. I don't believe they sell this in DJI or O3, at least not at the time of the recording this video. Very typical design, at least these days, where you have a single carbon plate that holds the motors and the flight controller, and then you have a series of standoffs and other components that lead to the prop guard. And this is, I think the Pavo 25. There's a few other, like the ones like from Darwin FPV. They all have this sort of similar setup where you have a carbon plate motors and flight controller attached to that, and then the prop guard is kind of offset and lower, obviously to protect you from getting hit by the props. So this is pretty common design now in terms of Cinewhoops. They have a different prop guard here, so it's not going to be coming out on camera very well, but it looks like this is some sort of piece of acrylic, and what they've done is they've cut out these holes for the prop guard, and then there's a little bit of a, lip here. It's kind of chamfered for airflow, but not really going to have any effect. Maybe it causes less noise. It's fairly thin. They got a thin piece of yellow foam here for a bumper guard, so that if you happen to be flying it indoors or hitting people, it's not going to hurt as much or cause any marks on the walls. I do like the fact that they are using some thinner foam now instead of like these giant 1-inch pieces of foam, which obviously doesn't add a lot of weight, but it just makes it a lot wider than it needs to be. And then you have this one, it's a 2mm carbon plate, and these little carbon pieces here, I guess that's to give this a little bit more strength here in these little sections. You have a cover here, a landing area, and there's a receiver underneath there. And you got some pieces of foam here to help with the landing. And then, so that's pretty much it there. They have in terms of all the components, 1204 5000 kV motors, pretty typical for 2.5-inch Cinewhoop in this sort of weight class. 600 milliwatt video transmitter, analog of course, and you just have a simple whip antenna here. The reception could be better if there was like a circular polarized antenna, so this is possibly one thing you may want to upgrade to get better video reception. The camera here is the Caddx Ant, and it's the version without the screw holes on the side. So what they've done here, this is one of the big problems, is they've created this TPU part to hold the camera because there was no screw holes in the camera itself, and so the camera was being held in here just by friction. So when I flew it the first time, it was lots of jello. It wasn't really jello, it was just the camera was shaking inside this TPU mount, and so it was almost unflyable. And I was like, wow, what's wrong with the camera? And I thought maybe something was wrong with the drone, but there was nothing wrong with the drone. It sounded fine. The PID tune's totally fine. It sounded like it was flying great, but the video that I was getting back was terrible. So I investigated after, I took it back home and I investigated and found out that this little TPU part here was not really secure. And so the camera was just kind of rattling around inside this little TPU hood. And so what I did was I just glued it, basically I glued the TPU part onto the camera board itself with some welder's glue. That fixed the problem. So now this TPU hood is permanently attached to the camera, and then the screws go into this TPU hood that will give you the angle. And so that's fixed, but it's likely that they didn't glue yours at the factory. If you get this, you're going to have to take the camera off to unscrew that, take the camera out, and then glue the camera into the hood with probably some welder's glue is probably the best. Maybe hot glue will work too. Then that'll secure the camera in the hood and it won't rattle around, and your video will be fine at that point. Okay, moving on, we have a all-in-one flight controller board here. I don't know who makes it. It's like a generic board. It's an F411, 20 amp BLHeli ESCs. It has a BMI 270 gyro, so pretty generic, and you can't really get a good look at it. It kind of looks like a Beta FPV or whatever. It has a, you can see here, a micro USB port right there, which is obviously really hard to get to. So they have this, I think this might be similar to the Hack RC board, where they have a extension cord that goes from there, and you have a USB-C port out right over here in this little camera mount area, which is nice. So adjusting your Betaflight settings was a breeze with that there. And we have all these cables that run. This is the little USB-C port here. You got some cables here. You got this little camera cable here. This is for this little tube, was basically for power, it's 5 volts. And this is for like cameras like the Runcam Thumb Pro, the Hawkeye. Be aware that you need to know what the polarity of that plug is compared to what your camera uses. Don't just plug it in, because I know that between the Runcam and the Hawkeye, their polarities are different. They're backwards between the two. So it might work on one and not the other, and you might fry your camera if you just plug it in. So be aware of the polarity. It is the right size, but the red and black might be reversed, and you need to then swap those wires in the connector there so they'll work correctly for your camera. So again, I'm giving you that warning there. I'm not going to tell you which is which, because you have to figure that out for yourself, but the polarity is an issue. I know a lot of people just plug it in not knowing what they're doing, and then they wonder why their camera fried. So on this mount here, this one here was not included. I believe in some other videos there was like a Runcam Thumb Pro mount in the video or in the product page. That wasn't included in the box. So there's certain cameras that come with this little, it's a 2mm screw that goes through here. So you'll need a mount that will match this. And I think that the Runcam Thumb Pro mounts will fit this. I made this little print here. I designed this part, and then I borrowed this little the little finger mounts here from a Runcam Thumb Pro STL and merged the two, and then I made this one. This is a Insta360 Go 3. That's the footage that you're going to see in the the flight footage. And then this little M2 screw here, and the nut is included along with the mount, but you don't get the actual mount for the camera. So you have to either come up with one for yourself or make one. I believe the Hawkeye Thumb Pro has the same mount here. So that one is built into the camera. That will fit this one, I'm pretty sure. I didn't actually try it myself, but it looks like it's going to fit this one fine. So if you have that camera, it should be good to go. Just make sure you double check your polarity on the plug there. So this one comes in a few different receiver versions: TBS Crossfire, Express LRS, I think Free Sky as well. They put my Express LRS receiver in this kind of weird spot. So it's not really easy to see, but it's right there. It's buried in there, like where the capacitor is. And then the antenna cable comes out over here, right there. And you see it's very close to the props. And then the T antenna is held here with this little zip tie. This is definitely not a good place to put this. This is one of the worst places to put this, because the carbon here is blocking the signals. So you will get some signal loss from this to your transmitter, and I did have some telemetry lost warnings when I was flying this around on 250 milliwatts, not very far away, and that's because this is a terrible place for the antenna. This I left it there because I wasn't going to fly far away, but I wanted to show you that this is where they put it. I recommend moving it to the front here is probably the best place, or the back over here somewhere. This is not good. So, and then another thing is, like, if you crash, this zip tie is going to break. This antenna is going to get caught into the props, and this whole thing will get chopped off. I can guarantee that. So you want to take this receiver, and you're going to have to probably take some of this stuff apart. I'm not going to go through every little thing here, but probably take this little plate off the bottom to get access to the receiver, unclip the zip tie there, and then you're going to probably want to move the antenna. If you move it to the front, use the zip tie here, break that and all these cables here, and then run your antenna cable through there, and then zip tie everything together, and then run the antenna probably out here underneath in front, and then zip tie it to the front right here. And then I think, yeah, if it's right here, I think that's going to be your best place for the antenna. I will probably do that if I keep this model, but the way it is right now is that's the second sort of big problem that you need to fix. Not a huge deal. Most people that know FPV will be able to fix that, but just follow the procedures and then you should be able to move that antenna, and that's going to be in a much better place. Alright, so this is how much the drone weighs just by itself. And we're coming in at 121.7 grams, so yeah, pretty light. This little lightweight acrylic prop guard doesn't probably weigh much at all. So I flew with two different batteries, the 650 and 854S. So here is the weight with the 650, coming in at 191.5, and then of course with the Go 3, the all-up flying weight, we're coming in at 227.4, and here's the weight with the 850, coming in at 208.5, and then with the Go 3, 244.3. So with the 850 and the Go 3 and the mount and everything, still coming in under 250 grams, so no remote ID needed and no registration needed, at least in the US. So the PID performance on both batteries, pretty similar. I didn't really notice that much of a difference because obviously it's only about, I don't know, a few grams difference, 20 grams or whatever, not a whole lot. The flight time difference is, it really depends on how aggressively you're flying. With the 650, you're going to be able to fly more aggressively, do a little more freestyle tricks. It can do it. It's a Cinewhoop. It's not really the most ideal, but if you really wanted to, you could. But the more aggressively you're flying on the 650, the shorter your flight time. So if you're flying super aggressively, let's say flight times as low as 3 minutes. More typical would be like 4 minutes, and if you're kind of cruising around, you get like maybe 5 minutes. So for me, with sort of mixed flying, I was getting typically 4 to 4.5 minutes on the 650, and then on the 850, I was typically getting 5.5 minutes roughly. If you're just flying slow, you can probably get maybe 6.5 to 7 minutes on the 850, and if you're flying more aggressively, it's going to be as low as maybe 4 minutes is probably on the low end if you're flying super aggressively. So it really depends on how you're flying, how much wind there is, etc. That's kind of the range that you're probably going to expect on these two batteries, and then I'll link both of these down in the video description if you guys want to check them out. So how does this compare to some of the other ones in this class, 2.5-inch Cinewhoop, like the Pavo 25, the Darwin FPV one? This one's probably, I think, on the lighter end in terms of overall weight. So that does mean it can fly a little bit more aggressively. So if that's what you're looking for. Again, it is analog. The Pavo 25 was DJI, so you have to account for that extra weight and those limitations, but of course it's DJI versus analog. And of course, if you convert this to DJI, which you might be able to do, there's not a whole lot of space here, but it's potentially possible here. There's a 20x20 mount for the VTX there, so certainly a possibility. Otherwise, I'm personally not going to be converting this myself. Of course, that's going to add more weight, and of course, that's going to affect the flight performance with that extra weight of the DJI system. So just keep that in mind. But overall, not a whole lot of difference between a lot of these Cinewhoops in the 2.5-inch class. It's just a little bit different styling and looks and slightly different weight. But in terms of flight performance, honestly, not that much different than the other ones that I reviewed. Alright, so I think that should cover everything on this model. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. And if you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. That would really help out the channel. The links will be down in the video description if you guys want to check out this model. That'll do it for this one. Talk to you guys in the next video.